The warning lights on the bridge of the Stellar Wanderer turned bright red just as they were about to jump to the next star system. Captain Lisa Parker felt her stomach drop when she heard the awful grinding noise coming from deep inside the ship. That sound never meant anything good. "I'll stop," she ordered quickly. "What's happening down there?" Chief Engineer Jake Martinez was already running toward the engine room before anyone could answer. He had been fixing machines for 20 years, first in the Navy and now on trading ships like this one. He knew that grinding sound meant big trouble. The Stellar Wanderer was not like the old human ships Jake used to work on. This ship was built by 3 different alien races working together. The Veltar were bug-like creatures who were very good at making things precise and exact. The Zephyrians looked like walking crystals and were excellent with computers and energy systems. The humans provided the crew and did most of the flying. Jake rushed into the engine room and saw chaos. The main fusion drive was shaking like an angry animal. Sparks flew from control panels that should never spark. The alien crew members were running around with their instruments, taking readings and checking their computers. Clixith, the lead Veltar engineer, was making clicking sounds with his mandibles. This meant he was very worried. His 4 arms moved quickly over different control screens while his big compound eyes watched dozens of displays at once. "Status report," Jake called out as he jogged over to the main console. "Primary fusion controller is failing." Clixith clicked in his translated voice. "Magnetic containment fields are becoming unstable. We must shut down immediately or risk containment breach." Jake looked at the readings and whistled low. "How bad is it?" The crystal-like Zephyrian engineer named Quex turned toward them. When Zephyrians were stressed, they glowed brighter, and Quex was practically blazing with white light right now. "Catastrophic failure imminent. Repair protocols require complete system shutdown, diagnostic phase, parts requisition, and certified replacement procedures." "How long?" Jake asked, though he already suspected he would not like the answer. "Minimum 72 standard hours," Clixith replied. "Possibly longer if replacement components must be fabricated. We will need to request assistance from Kepler Station." Jake rubbed his face with both hands. Kepler Station was 4 days away by emergency thrusters. They would be sitting dead in space, burning through life support and food, waiting for help that might take a week to arrive. "Can we limp along on auxiliary power?" he asked. Every alien in the engine room stopped what they were doing and stared at Jake like he had just suggested they all jump out the airlock. Quex actually dimmed with what Jake had learned with shock. "Absolutely not," Clixith said firmly. "Operating damaged fusion systems violate 17 different safety protocols. The risk of cascade failure is unacceptable." Jake walked over to the main fusion assembly and started looking at the damaged components. To him, it looked like a bearing had seized up in the magnetic field generator. The whole thing was overheating because coolant was not flowing properly. He had seen similar problems in ship engines back on Earth. "What if we bypassed the damaged section and rerouted power through the secondary manifolds?" Jake suggested. The silence in the engine room was so complete that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Then Clixith started making rapid clicking sounds that Jake knew meant extreme agitation. "That procedure is not listed in any approved maintenance manual," the Veltar engineer said. "Such modifications require extensive testing, certification, and approval from 3 separate engineering committees." "It's just a temporary fix to get us moving," Jake said. "We don't need it to be perfect, just good enough to reach the next port." Quex's crystal body was now flashing different colors in what Jake had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of having a panic attack. "Good enough is not acceptable for fusion containment systems. Imprecise modifications lead to catastrophic failures. The mathematical probability of success for unauthorized repairs is less than 12%. Jake looked around at all the alien faces staring at him. They were looking at him like he was crazy. In their cultures, machines were built to exact specifications and repaired only by certified technicians using approved parts and procedures. The idea of improvising or making temporary fixes was completely foreign to them. Maria Santos, the SciFi communications officer, came down to the engine room to see what was happening. She had grown up on a frontier colony where making things work with whatever you had was just part of life. How bad is it? She asked Jake quietly. Bad enough that our alien friends want to sit here for a week waiting for the proper replacement. Parts? Jake replied. Maria looked at the fusion assembly, then at the worried alien crew members. And you think you can fix it faster? I think I can get us limping along in a few hours with some creative problem solving, Jake said. But they think I'm going to blow up the ship. Captain Parker's voice came over the intercom. Engine room. What's our status? Clixith activated the comm system. Captain, primary fusion drive requires complete shutdown and certified repair procedures. Estimated repair time is 72 hours minimum, assuming parts availability. Understood, came the captain's voice. Jake, do you have any other options? Jake looked around at the alien crew members, who were all watching him with expressions ranging from concern to outright fear. He could see in their eyes that they thought any deviation from proper procedures was basically suicide. Maybe, Jake said carefully, but it would involve some non-standard approaches that might make our alien friends uncomfortable. The silence stretched on for several seconds before Captain Parker replied, Stand by, engine room. All senior staff to the bridge for conference. As Jake headed for the bridge, he could hear Clixith and Quex having what sounded like a very worried conversation in their own languages. He caught enough translated words to know they were discussing the dangerous unpredictability of human engineering practices. This was going to be interesting. The meeting on the bridge lasted only 10 minutes, but Jake could tell it was going to be a long 10 minutes. Captain Parker sat at the head of the table with her hands folded, listening to both sides argue about what to do next. Clixith had brought 3 different technical manuals and was clicking through them rapidly, while he explained why any unauthorized repairs would be dangerous. His forearms moved like he was conducting an orchestra, while he talked about safety protocols and proper procedures. The fusion containment system is not like your human combustion engines, Clixith said, his translator making his voice sound very formal. One small mistake and the magnetic fields collapse. When that happens, the plasma temperature reaches 15 million degrees. The ship would be vaporized in microseconds. Quex was glowing a steady orange color, which Jake had learned meant the crystal being was trying to stay calm but not succeeding very well. Our people have been building fusion drives for over 400 years. We have never had a catastrophic failure because we follow tested procedures. Human methods are unpredictable. Jake leaned back in his chair and tried not to look annoyed. Look, I understand you folks like to do things by the book, but sometimes the book doesn't have an answer for the situation you're in right now. The book has answers for every possible situation, Clixith replied firmly. That is why we write books. Yeah, well, your book says we sit here for a week and hope nobody runs out of air before help arrives, Jake said. My way gets us moving in a few hours. Captain Parker held up her hand before the argument could get worse. Jake, explain exactly what you want to do, in simple terms. Jake stood up and walked over to the wall display. He pulled up a schematic of the fusion drive and pointed to the problem area. See this bearing assembly here? It's seized up because the coolant flow got blocked. That's causing the whole magnetic containment field to wobble. He traced his finger along some of the power lines on the display. Now, if we bypass this section and reroute the field generators through the secondary power grid, we can stabilize the containment field long enough to get where we're going. Impossible, Quex said immediately. Secondary power grid operates at different frequency harmonics, incompatible with primary fusion containment protocols. That's why we use a frequency converter, Jake said. Maria here can rig one up from spare communications equipment. Won't be pretty, but it'll work. Maria Santos nodded. I've done similar jury rigging before. Back on New Montana, we kept the colony fusion plant running for 6 months with parts from a broken mining drill. Both alien engineers made sounds that their translators couldn't properly convert, but Jake was pretty sure they were expressions of horror. Captain Parker looked between the humans and the aliens. What are the real risks here, Jake? Jake thought for a moment. If I'm wrong about the frequency conversion, worst case is the drive shuts down completely and we're back where we started. If I'm right, we get 70% power and can make it to the next port in 2 days instead of waiting here for a week. And if the containment fails? The captain asked. Then we all become very hot very quickly, Jake admitted. But I don't think that's going to happen. This is basic mechanical engineering. The principles are the same whether it's a car engine or a starship drive. Klixth's mandibles were clicking so fast they sounded like castanets. Basic mechanical engineering does not apply to 17-dimensional magnetic containment matrices, operating at quantum flux levels that would incinerate your entire home planet. Sure it does, Jake said with a shrug. It's still just plumbing and wiring when you get down to it. Fluid flows, electricity moves, things get hot or cold. Same physics everywhere. The silence in the room was so thick, Jake could have cut it with a knife. Finally, Captain Parker made her decision. We'll try Jake's approach, she said, but with conditions. All non-essential personnel evacuate to the forward sections. Emergency containment protocols on standby. And if anything looks like it's going wrong, we shut down immediately. Klixth and Quex both started talking at once in their own languages. Jake caught enough translated fragments to know they were discussing whether they should request immediate transfer off the ship. Captain, Quex said, his crystal body now flashing red, I must officially protest this decision. My people will hold me responsible if this vessel is destroyed due to unauthorized modifications. Noted and logged, Captain Parker said. Jake, you have 4 hours. If it doesn't work, we do this the safe way and wait for help. Jake grinned and headed for the door. 4 hours? I'll have her purring like a kitten in 2. As he left the HFY bridge with Maria following behind, Jake could hear Klixth explaining to the captain why humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy when it came to mechanical systems. Something about how they treated precision-engineered equipment like primitive tools. Down in the engine room, Jake started gathering the parts he would need. The alien crew members watched him like he was about to perform surgery with a chainsaw. Every time he picked up a tool or looked at a schematic, someone would make a worried sound. Hand me that plasma cutter, Jake said to one of the Veltar technicians. The technician's compound eyes went wide. You are going to cut into the fusion. Assembly? Just need to remove some access panels, Jake said. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. That is exactly what we are worried about, Quex muttered, but his translator made it sound very polite. Maria was already working on the frequency converter, stripping components out of a broken communication relay and rewiring them according to Jake's specifications. She worked with the easy confidence of someone who had spent her whole life making broken things work again. You know, she said without looking up from her work, back home we had a saying, if you can't fix it with duct tape and determination, you're not using enough of either. The sound that came from Klixth at that moment was definitely not something his translator could handle. Jake was pretty sure it was either a prayer or a curse, maybe both. As Jake started removing the access panels from the fusion assembly, he could feel all the alien eyes watching his every move. They expected him to make a mistake that would kill everyone on the ship. He was going to prove them wrong. He hoped. Jake was elbow deep in the fusion assembly when he realized he had a bigger audience than expected. Word had somehow spread through the ship that the humans were attempting an impossible repair. Alien crew members from all departments had found excuses to visit the engine room. They stood in small groups, whispering in their own languages and pointing at Jake and Maria as they worked. Some held recording devices, though Jake wasn't sure if they were documenting the repair or preparing evidence for the inevitable investigation. Hand me that converter Maria's working on, Jake called out, not looking up from the tangle of cables he was sorting through. Maria passed him the device she had cobbled together from communication equipment, a broken coffee maker, and what appeared to be part of a door chime. It looked like something a child might build from scrap metal, all exposed wires and hastily soldered connections. Klixth made a sound like air escaping from a punctured tire. That device is not rated for fusion system integration, he said, his forearms twitching nervously. It doesn't need to be rated, Jake replied, connecting the converter to the secondary power grid. It just needs to work long enough to get us home. Quex was glowing so brightly now that other crew members had to shield their eyes when they looked at him. The harmonic frequencies are completely wrong. This will create cascade resonance failures throughout the entire power matrix. Jake paused in his work and looked up at the crystal engineer. You know, Quex, you might be right. But there's only One way to find out. He turned a small dial on Maria's converter and watched the readings on his handheld scanner. The power frequencies began to match, just like he had hoped they would. "Well, I'll be damned," Jake muttered with satisfaction. "Look at that, Maria. Clean power conversion." A Veltar technician who had been watching from the corner suddenly stepped forward. "The magnetic containment field readings are stabilizing," he said, sounding confused. "How is this possible?" Jake grinned and continued connecting cables. "Because physics is physics no matter what species figured it out first. Energy flows where you tell it to flow if you give it the right path." More alien crew members crowded into the engine room as word spread that the impossible repair was actually working. Jake could hear them talking in excited whispers, though their translators only caught fragments of their conversations. Humans. Ignore all safety protocols. Magnetic field stability increasing. A complete violation of engineering principles. Somehow achieving better efficiency than original design. Maria finished connecting the last bypass cable and stepped back to admire their work. The fusion assembly now looked like it had been attacked by a mad inventor. Cables ran in directions they were never meant to go, connected to devices that had no business being part of a starship engine. "Ready when you are, Jake," she said, wiping grease from her hands. Jake looked around at all the alien faces watching him. They looked like they were attending an execution and weren't sure if they were the condemned or the witnesses. "All right, everyone might want to step back a bit," Jake said, "just in case." The entire alien crew immediately moved toward the exits. Some actually left the engine room completely. Clixith and Quex stayed, but Jake noticed they had positioned themselves near the emergency shutdown controls. Bringing the fusion drive online in 3, 2, 1. Jake activated the startup sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the fusion assembly began to hum with a sound that was completely different from before. Instead of the angry, grinding noise from earlier, it now purred like a contented cat. The readings on every monitor in the engine room began climbing toward normal levels. Power flow stabilized. Magnetic containment fields locked into perfect alignment. The temperature readings dropped back into the safe zone. But that wasn't the amazing part. The amazing part was that all the readings were better than they had been before the breakdown. "Impossible," Quex whispered, his crystal body flickering between colors like a broken light. "Efficiency is 23% above original specifications." Clixith was rapidly checking different displays with all four arms, his compound eyes moving so fast they looked like they were vibrating. "All systems show optimal performance. This should not be possible with unauthorized modifications." Jake shrugged and started collecting his tools. "Sometimes when you fix something, you accidentally make it better than it was before. Happens all the time back home." The alien crew members began talking all at once, creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and harmonic tones that the translators couldn't keep up with. Jake caught words like miraculous, terrifying, and completely against all known engineering principles. Captain Parker's voice came over the intercom. "Engine room, I'm seeing some very interesting readings up here. Status report? Fusion drive is online and running better than new," Jake replied. "We're ready to get underway whenever you are, Captain." There was a pause before the captain responded. "Better than new?" "Yes, ma'am. Sometimes the manufacturer's specs aren't as good as they could be. We just helped the engine reach its full potential." Another pause. "Understood. Prepare for departure in 30 minutes. As Jake and Maria began cleaning up their tools, the alien crew members continued staring at the fusion assembly like it was some kind of religious artifact. A few of them had actually fallen to their knees, though Jake wasn't sure if they were praying or having nervous breakdowns. "Jake," Quex said quietly, his voice barely audible over the smooth humming of the drive. "How did you know this would work?" Jake looked at the crystal engineer and thought about how to explain it. "I didn't know for sure, but I've been fixing things my whole life, and most problems are simpler than they look. You just have to be willing to try something different." "But the risk," Clixith said, his mandibles clicking slowly. "There's always risk," Maria added. "But sometimes the risk of trying is smaller than the risk of doing nothing." One of the younger Veltar technicians stepped forward hesitantly. Could you teach us how to do repairs like this?" Before Jake could answer, half the alien crew began making sounds of alarm. The idea of learning human repair techniques seemed to frighten them even more than watching the techniques being used. "I don't know if your people are ready for that," Jake said diplomatically. "But maybe we could start with something simple, like changing a light bulb without reading the manual first." The horrified silence that followed told Jake that even changing a light bulb without proper procedures was considered dangerous by alien standards. He was beginning to understand why they thought humans were completely insane. The news spread faster than Jake had expected. Within 6 hours of their successful repair, Captain Parker was receiving urgent messages from space stations across 3 different star systems. Every alien engineering guild in the sector wanted to know exactly what the humans had done to the Stellar Wanderer's fusion drive. Jake was trying to enjoy a quiet meal in the mess hall when Dr. Rachel Green called from the research vessel Aurora's Dream. She appeared on the wall screen looking both fascinated and worried at the same time. "Jake, I need you to explain exactly what you did down there," Dr. Green said. She was an anthropologist who studied how different species worked together, and she had been following reports of human repair methods for months. "I fixed a broken fusion drive," Jake said around a mouthful of synthesized beef. "Nothing special about it. According to the reports I'm getting, you violated 47 different safety protocols and somehow made the engine work better than when it was new," Dr. Green replied. "The Zephyrian Engineering Council is calling it either a miracle or an act of mechanical terrorism." Jake nearly choked on his food. "Terrorism? I fixed their engine." Dr. Green looked down at her notes. "I've been collecting data on human repair incidents across the galaxy, Jake. What you did isn't unique. It's part of a pattern that's making a lot of alien engineers very nervous." She pulled up a list on her screen. 3 weeks ago, Sam Johnson, on mining station Kepler-7, treated a Veltar engineer for plasma poisoning using antibiotics designed for humans. According to Veltar medical protocols, the treatment should have killed the patient. Instead, the engineer made a full recovery in half the expected time. Jake shrugged. "Sam's a good medic. He figures out what works." Last month, Pete Williams, on Titan Base, kept an ore processing plant running for 6 months using parts from 3 different manufacturers. The plant was supposed to shut down for major repairs, but Pete jury-rigged a solution using spare parts from a water recycling system and some kind of musical instrument. "Sounds like Pete," Jake said. "Always was creative with spare parts." Dr. Green leaned closer to her screen. "Jake, do you understand what you people are doing? You're treating advanced alien technology like it's made of tinker toys. You're ignoring safety protocols that were written after centuries of careful testing, and somehow you're making everything work better." Before Jake could respond, Maria Santos sat down next to him with her own meal tray. "Hey, Doc," she said to the screen. "You collecting stories about human fix-it jobs?" "Maria, perfect timing," Dr. Green said. "Can you explain to me how you built a frequency converter out of communication equipment and kitchen appliances?" Maria thought for a moment. "Well, the basic principle is pretty simple. You just need to match the wave patterns between the 2 systems. The coffee maker had a heating element that vibrated at almost the right frequency, so I used that as a base oscillator and fine-tuned it with some circuits from the door chime." The silence from Dr. Green's end of the call stretched on for several seconds. Finally, she spoke. "Maria, what you just described should be impossible. Those components aren't designed to work together." "Sure they are," Maria replied. "Everything's designed to work together if you understand how electricity flows. It's all just electrons moving around, whether it's in a starship or a toaster." Dr. Green rubbed her forehead like she had a headache. "I'm starting to understand why the aliens are so worried. You people look at their most advanced technology and see household appliances." "Pretty much," Jake agreed. "A machine is a machine, no matter how fancy it looks on the outside." Captain Parker's voice came over the intercom, interrupting their conversation. "All senior staff to the bridge. We're receiving priority communications from multiple alien authorities." When Jake and Maria arrived at the bridge, they found Captain Parker dealing with what looked like a 3-way argument between different alien species. The main screen was split into sections showing representatives from the Veltar Engineering Guild, the Zephyrian Technical Council, and something called the Galactic Safety Commission. The Veltar representative was clicking rapidly while waving all four arms. Unauthorized modifications to fusion containment systems represent a clear violation of interstellar safety standards. We demand immediate inspection and certification of all human repair work. The Zephyrian representative was glowing bright. Red, which Jake had learned, meant they were angry. Human repair techniques are spreading throughout our colonies. Our engineers are requesting psychological counseling after witnessing humans fix impossible problems with primitive methods. The third alien, who looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a tree, spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. The Galactic Safety Commission has received 47 formal complaints about human engineering practices in the past month alone. We are considering restrictions on human access to advanced technology. Captain Parker looked tired. Gentlemen, my engineer fixed our broken drive so we could complete our mission. I fail to see how that constitutes a safety violation. Your engineer bypassed critical safety systems using improvised components. The Veltar clicked. This is not acceptable repair methodology. Jake stepped forward. With respect, sir, your acceptable repair methodology would have left us floating dead in space for a week. My way got us moving in 2 hours and made the engine work better than before. That is exactly the problem, the Zephyrian said, his crystal body flickering with agitation. Human repairs should not work better than original specifications. It violates fundamental engineering principles. Maria leaned over to Jake and whispered, I think that's supposed to be a compliment. The jellyfish tree alien spoke again. We are implementing emergency protocols to monitor all human engineering activities. Any repairs or modifications must be approved by certified alien technicians before implementation. That's ridiculous, Captain Parker said. You're essentially banning humans from fixing anything. Perhaps that would be best, the Veltar representative clicked. Human repair methods are unpredictable and dangerous. They ignore established safety protocols and use unauthorized components. But they work, a new voice said from off-screen. Another alien appeared in the communication link, this one looking like a walking plant with too many arms. I am engineer. Bloom of steel from the merchant vessel Green Current. 3 days ago, a human mechanic named Danny Cooper repaired our navigation computer using parts from a food processor and some kind of entertainment device. The repair was not only successful, but our navigation accuracy improved by 38%. The other aliens on the call began talking all at once, creating a cacophony of clicks, chimes, and harmonic tones that the translators couldn't keep up with. Jake looked at Captain Parker. I think we might have started something bigger than we realized. No kidding, she replied, watching the alien representatives argue among themselves. Dr. Green was right. This isn't just about one repair job. This is about how humans approach problems differently than everyone else. On the screen, the aliens were still arguing about whether human repair methods were miraculous innovations or dangerous violations of universal order. Jake had a feeling this conversation was going to continue for a very long time, and based on what Dr. Green had told them, similar conversations were probably happening all across the galaxy. 2 weeks later, Jake found himself in the strangest situation of his life. He was standing in the Grand Assembly Hall of Kepler Station, facing a panel of the most important engineers in the galaxy. They had called it an emergency hearing to decide whether humans should be banned from touching alien technology ever again. The hall was enormous, with representatives from dozens of different species sitting in curved rows that stretched up toward the ceiling. Jake felt very small standing at the center podium with all those alien eyes focused on him. State your name and occupation for the record, said the lead judge, a tall Zephyrian whose crystal body was glowing a neutral blue color. Jake Martinez, chief engineer aboard the trading vessel Stellar Wanderer, Jake replied. I fix things that are broken. A ripple of translated whispers went through the audience. Several alien engineers shook their heads or made sounds of disapproval. The judge consulted a datapad that was almost as big as Jake's entire torso. Engineer Martinez, you stand accused of performing unauthorized modifications to a fusion containment System using improvised components and ignoring 47 established safety protocols. How do you plead? Jake looked around the huge room and wondered how his simple repair job had turned into a trial. I guess I plead confused, Your Honor. I fixed a broken engine so my ship could get home safely. I don't understand why that's a crime. Another judge, this one a Veltar with unusually bright green coloring, leaned forward. The crime, human, is that your repair methods violate centuries of established engineering doctrine. You treat precision equipment like primitive tools. Because that's what they are, Jake said simply. Precision tools are still just tools. They follow the same basic rules as everything else. The sound that came from the alien audience was like 1,000 people gasping at the same time. Several engineers in the front row actually stood up and left the room, apparently too shocked to continue listening. Dr. Rachel Green, who was sitting in the witness section, raised her hand. Your Honors, may I present additional evidence? The lead judge nodded, and Dr. Green walked to a display screen at the side of the room. She pulled up a star map showing dozens of systems scattered across 3 sectors of space. In the past 6 months, I have documented over 200 incidents of humans successfully repairing alien technology using what the manufacturers would consider improper methods, she said. In every single case, the repairs not only worked, but improved the equipment's performance. She pointed to different systems on the map as she spoke. Danny Cooper on Rigel Station fixed a water recycling plant using parts from an exercise machine. Lisa Walsh on the mining ship Big Digger repaired a gravity generator with components from a musical synthesizer. Bobby Chen at the agricultural colony on New Eden got their weather control system working again, using circuits from children's toys. The Veltar judge was clicking his mandibles so rapidly it sounded like machine gun fire. These incidents prove that humans are dangerous and unpredictable. They ignore safety protocols that exist to protect everyone. But they work, said a voice from the audience. Everyone turned to see a small Zephyrian engineer standing up in the back rows. I am Technician Spark of Understanding from the merchant vessel Crystal Wing. Last month, a human named Tony Garcia repaired our entire communication array using spare parts from our food preparation system. We had been without long-range communications for 3 weeks. Our own engineer said the damage was irreparable. Another alien stood up, this one looking like a walking flower with too many petals. Engineer Rose in Bloom from Mining Station, Alpha 7. The human Beth Morrison fixed our ore processor using components that our manuals said were completely incompatible. The processor now operates at 140% of original efficiency. More aliens began standing up throughout, the audience each with their own story of impossible human repairs that had somehow worked perfectly. The judges looked increasingly uncomfortable as the testimonies continued. Captain Parker, who had been allowed to speak as a character witness, approached the podium. Your Honors, I've been working with mixed crews for 15 years. I've seen what happens when different species try to solve problems together. Most of the time, we each stick to our own methods and everything works fine. But sometimes you need someone who thinks differently. She gestured toward Jake. My engineer doesn't ignore safety protocols because he's reckless. He ignores them because he understands something that your protocols don't account for. He sees the underlying principles that make all machines work, regardless of who built them or what they're supposed to do. The lead judge was quiet for a long moment, his crystal body flickering between different colors. Finally, he spoke. The panel will recess to consider all testimony. The judges left the room, and Jake sat down in the defendant's chair, feeling exhausted. Maria Santos, who had come along as technical support, patted him on the shoulder. Think they'll ban us from fixing things? She asked. I honestly don't know, Jake replied. Half of them think we're dangerous lunatics, and the other half think we're miracle workers. Maybe we're both, Maria said with a grin. After 2 hours, the judges returned. The lead Zephyrian stood up and addressed the packed assembly hall. After extensive deliberation, this panel has reached a decision. While human repair methods do indeed violate established safety protocols and ignore manufacturer specifications, the evidence shows that these methods are consistently successful and often superior to conventional approaches. The hall erupted, in a mixture of cheers and protests from different species. The judge raised his hand for silence. Therefore, the panel rules that humans will be permitted to continue their repair activities, but with the following conditions. All human engineering work must be observed and documented by certified alien technicians. Humans will be required to teach their methods to mixed crews so that others can learn these techniques. And most importantly, humans must provide psychological, counseling, and stress management support for any alien engineers who suffer nervous breakdowns while watching human repair procedures. Jake looked around the room at all the alien faces. Some looked relieved, others looked terrified, and a few looked genuinely curious. There is one additional requirement, the judge continued. Engineer Martinez, you will establish a training program to teach human repair techniques to volunteer alien students. However, attendance will be strictly voluntary, and all participants must sign medical waivers acknowledging the psychological risks of learning to think like a human engineer. As Jake left the courtroom, he was approached by a young Veltar technician who had been watching the proceedings from the gallery. Engineer Martinez, the alien said hesitantly, I would like to learn your methods, but perhaps we could start with something simple, maybe fixing a small device that is not critical to life support? Jake smiled and shook the technician's hand. Sure thing, kid. How about we start with a broken flashlight? Can't hurt anybody with a flashlight, right? The look of pure terror that crossed the young alien's face told Jake that even fixing a flashlight without proper authorization was considered extremely dangerous by alien standards. This was going to be a very interesting teaching assignment.